Alright guys, it's hot one at Booma's Juke's it's going pretty good, runs pretty good, pretty happy with it, but I'm just hooking it back up to Hscope. I looked up the specs for it. We're going to take us a Goodwill tomorrow, give it a good probably about 80-mile round trip, test, take the highway down, take the hills back, and so we'll be giving it a good workout for sure. But I got Hscope hooked up. I looked up the schematic on the Android tablet. So I figured while I got the Android out, I'm going to do this and the Modis. But this I'm going to do cam and crank, the correlation, just like we did before with the loose chain, the chain that was coming through the timing cover. We're going to compare that with, I'm not sure if there's a way you could overlay it. You Hscope guys, I mean, need a little help here. You guys got more experience. If there is a way, just kindly let me know like you always do. You guys have been a great help. If I can overlay them, but it's going to be hard because there's two. This would be like running 4 channels going on and off, but one way or another, we're going to compare the two. Even if we do it side by side on a split screen, something like that, we're going to compare the two. I'm going to do this first on the 2 channels, then I'm going to do it again on the Modis with the 2 channels. Then I'm also going to try to put a 3rd channel sync in, at least get the secondary ignition. It's a little bit hard to get to them. The coils, they're a little bit buried in there, but I got paddle probe. I think I could get them. I usually do get a signal off of it. Sometimes the coils, the ACE don't cooperate. They're too insulated, but I should be able to get something off of it for a sync. All right, guys, I'm gonna just set this here. Zoom you in a little bit. I don't know. I think the white screen might be a little bit better with the glare. But what I'm gonna do is start it in oscilloscope mode. I did have a pointer here somewhere, but the screen poker. Right, already we see a little, it's not walking around as much. I don't see anything like lining up like the last video, like I was saying, like, well, there's one part that lines up. There's like a leading edge on one of them. I'm not sure which would be what would be triggering the ignition off, but we could tell that this one big one, there's one big. That would probably be the trigger on the wheel there. But the one, the blue, which would be the cam sensor. It's hard to get these, and now that I got the wires going backwards here. Yes, the first channel, which would be the dark blue, that's the cam sensor. The pink signal or the purple sensor, that's the crank signal. So if we want to take a more traditional look at it. Alright guys, that's in scope mode. Now I'm going to switch to oscilloscope mode. Or yeah, right, that's what I'm on there. I'm going to automotive mode now. Record. Okay, probably something a little bit different with my scale there. I'm going to stop it. Hit the eyeball. See if that helps me. No, it does not. Okay, we're way up. No, not really. There's a little bit better. What we got in the buffer there. Now we could go back and compare it to the other one. What I was looking for on the other one is we didn't see any edges that were, these aren't lining up perfectly, but we're getting, really close. but it's just where you would find a sync to line the two up if you were looking. Like, you know, if you were checking time and then you had a known good one like this, it just got a new chain on it, or not. Now, if I see this ever moving on the car again, run into another Juke, it's good to have. I mean, it's a nice little scope for taking images like that. I really like that. Now, I could do, with a paddle probe, I could just do, you know, the crank with the ignition, the cam with the ignition. But that I'm going to just switch over, use the Modis, and see if we could get the cam, crank, and ignition all on the same. I probably could on the hand tech with this if I broke it out, but, you know, that thing's getting used less and less, the 8 channel. It's 4 good ones on the Modis and 2 good ones on this have been, you know, as much as I've needed for now. All right, let me switch that over. I'm actually going to run this again, and I'm going to run it up to probably about 2,000 RPM, just see what we see any difference. I don't know if I should zero these out. No, I shouldn't. I should have just moved them actually on their own, but no big deal. Alright, now I'm going to just rev it up a little bit. All right, let me stop that. Just want to look at under the, even under a rev, the one line to, at least we got one line that matching up. Now I can't tell you which one of these are number one and which one, but what you'd be doing is if you were counting, like say on crank, you'd be looking for, like the cam signal would be the big blue one. You'd be lining up where these edges met and counting on the crank. I'm going to save that as well. Could have probably backed down the resolution a little bit and made these edges a little bit more square. Well, the sample rate's on 19. That's for being revved. It's all right. Okay, now I'm going to switch to the Modis and see if I could get a, well, before I forget, I always do like saving these. I'll name them later. And then we're going to do some comparison. All right, guys. All right, guys, I just switched over to leads. These are leads. I made a nice set of 10-foot leads from that wire I was showing you in the one video. From Acer Racing. It's good heavy 14 gauge wire. This will be first time I'm using it on, because it's just the leads that come with the Modis. I made some extensions for the ones that come with it, but they're very short. And you know, if you're going to get into the leads, like here's a prime example. Hold on a second. This is a Hand-Tech lead. I mean, I've used it maybe once or twice. I went to get it for one of the channels, and whenever I put the clip in, straight off. I mean, I just always go a little bit backwards. I don't pull very hard, but I always make sure everything's attached right. I mean, this is a Hand-Tech. I mean, just a BNC to the 1/4 inch. I mean, I still had it coiled up. But it is what it is. But that's why you make them. You're trusting your own solder joint, and that's just ridiculous for something that's been used that much. Especially it being that it was partly attached. What if you were sitting there saying, you know, calling the sensor dead because of that? Yeah. A little more solder, guys. But we'll use that for parts or solder it back together. Those usually are pretty good leads. And I mean, I have another set of them that never did that, and I would have probably trusted it. But not no more. Fool me once. But anyways, let me start it up. Alright, looks like we've got some more time on there. This probably isn't how you would want to read it. It's a lot. You know, we could see the sink marks a little, or the sink marks a little bit better on the cam and the crank. But what I'm going to do, we could also move the waveform up, but for right now, well, I could move it now. Oh, I'm moving the trigger. I'm sorry, guys. It takes a second every time I move to a different platform or a tool. I hate it, but hey, it's how it is, right? I should have moved the green one down, though. It's the yellow's the cam sensor and the green's the crank sensor. You can name them and everything on this scope. I mean, it's pretty nice for if you're, but you could double overlay them like that. Now we see a little bit better sync where it's lining up. I thought maybe two big teeth were going to line up in the middle, but at least you know you could get a known good waveform and get your own. But we're going to move that down just a little bit for now because we're going to add the third channel. And we're going to go with the paddle probe and try to get an ignition sync. And this is just, that's a Modis over there, and I just got the VGA cable running over to an old HP monitor. I really like it. I like the gloss, like in the size of it. I mean, it makes everything, it's easier to read than the Modis actual screen. See guys, here's what I mean. You could tell I've been using this set for a while. I've used these on every scope I've had so far, and even the Hscope. I got a 2-pack, and this one was, you know, battered around. This one was a newer one. You know, just took it out of the bag, almost like that. Not this time. The last time I did cam crank on the Juke. So, you know, this one was working great. Took this one out, you know, tested, got a reading and everything. I actually used this one last time for the cam crank. Went to put it on this time, just that little bit loose. I mean, junk. It's now I don't want to trust that one now, even though it gave me no issues, but I know that could happen every time. Alright guys, here's what I'm working with here. The cart works pretty good. It gets you know, the tripod and everything, so you can get a good look at the screen. Still got the same 2 channels on. The Hand-Tech paddle probe. I'm going to take this. Could sync with anything, but number 1, somewhat accessible. And you know, these things, they bend pretty good, so it might be tough, but I'm going to fandangle it. I'll move the screen so I could see at the same time. That's what makes the screen nice. I mean, a lot of times if you try to record something under the hood, something's falling over, something, it's hard to hold the camera. It's pretty good. The camera could get a good view and I could get a good view, so good deal the whole way around. All right, I'm going to start the car and then I'm going to shuffle around it. Alright, I'm over on the side. I'm going to add a third channel. Channel 3, split. You don't want to be on a 20. Okay, let's see if you see anything here. Okay, there we are, way on the bottom. We're going to move channel 3 up and go to a smaller scale. Okay, we're going to put it there, and then that. Let's see what 2 volt looks like. Alright, did get something on there. That's pretty good for, pretty happy I was able to get on the portal. That's number 1. And even if I couldn't get to number 1, if I could have got to number 3 or 4, or as long as you have something to sync from, you'll be able to figure it out. It's a lot easier with number 1 to line it up, just for what we're looking at. Gonna see if I could hold it steady and fill the buffer up with I don't know if slowing this down would be beneficial. We just got one to see what happens. Well, we'll get more information on the screen for sure. Okay, let me go back. Try to the other way. This is probably a little bit closer. Okay, now I could actually save that buffer. No, but I had to pause it before the end. I'm not sure how much you get on it. I'm not very used to Hscope yet, but it's, when I spend a little time away from it, it's harder to just remember what I was doing. No, I lost it there. Okay, I got to stop before the end of the buffer, I believe. Just want to get as much information in there as I can. Naturally, this is happening over and over again. We're not looking for a fault, so you know, just a couple screens worth is actually good. And I'm bending this almost in a complete U to get it on there, but it's, if I wanted to get a higher RPM, I'd have to have somebody rev it, and Aaron's not up here right now. I'd have to call her out, and just for that, it's, you know, at idle, that's going to be good enough for me. Okay, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to stop that. Make sure I got something there. You got to save the movie. Same thing here, I'm not going to name it yet. I'm going to know what it is whenever I go back and look at it. Okay, now I'm going to do it on a different time scale, just have even more information on the screen. Oh, no, I'm not. One second on me. All right, let's save one at that. Because I believe you could go back and zoom in on them. Hope that actually zoomed all the way. Interesting. Alright, just to make sure, I'm going to do one. I can't remember what time base I used on last one. So I'm going to do one more just in case I want to compare it that close. There should be a way also to normalize the trigger on channel 3. If I remember, displayed, nope, I believe I'm over. Channel 3, normalize. something we could get a trigger off of the secondary, but seem to be having issues with that, but not a big deal. I was just looking more for the normalize. Stop it there and just say that. Alright guys, let me turn this Juke off. Alright guys, there it is on both of them. It's pretty easy to see. You can move around your line up the signals like I got on Hscope down here. It's the same thing on the Modis. The zoom's a little bit. Let me see if I can zoom out a little bit there. Looking at the only thing I could see, I was just interested not so much about the ignition, because there should be 4 ignition events between here and here. The crank going 720, but what I'm looking for is just any repetition. And what I could see is the cam sensor lines up here, here, and a block. And then there's 3 teeth on the bottom, then a block. Then it lines up with there, lines up there, lines up there, then the next one block. It keeps repeating over and over. It's so I could kind of see in my head without looking at you know, a known good or anything like that. It's just how these sensors are talking to the computer, you know, keeping everything in time. Now the ignition, that's good to have on there. One thing I kind of wish it was on Hscope, because I'd be able to zoom this out. I might be able to on this, but once I save the image, like if I wanted to actually look at that waveform and I wanted to stretch the time base is great whenever you're doing a review. I know there's a way, I'm trying to think how Danner does it, but I know he puts a lot of time on the screen, but how does he go back in and zoom, like get a better look like this? Once you already have the data on the Modis, like if you go to the zoom, you start at 1 and what you recorded it on. Now if you wanted, maybe that's it. I know he did it one of the 2 ways. I thought he put a lot of time on the screen, but I guess you don't put as much because this buffer is pretty long. I'm not sure the exact, this up to 2 minutes, I believe, on what we were at on a 100 millisecond sweep. So you could have cut that way down to the whole screen was only, you know, what do you need? I'm not sure what, like, you know, known good would be taken at, but you wouldn't need 2 whole seconds. So that might be 2 minutes. I'm not even sure. Let me hit play on this. Just out of curiosity, how fast does that move? That's the auto scroll. So yeah, it's a lot more time. A lot more time than we needed. But if you wanted to zoom in on just the ignition, I don't see how you make it bigger, because once you go to the zoom, all you're presented with is it zooms. To me, it zooms out. And if you hit just like zoom out, like this is, So we zoom way out, and then if you hit zoom out, I mean, you're going the other. So you have to go back your best, how do I want to say it, your slowest resolution to watch. You couldn't zoom in anymore. Like if you wanted change the time base on the blue lead, if you wanted to see the secondary ignition pattern a little bit better, you know, there might be a way to do that. I know how I do that on Hscope, you know, but I didn't get the ignition on there. I just got the cam and the crank. But hey, great job to both scopes. I could have got one ignition and cam sensor, an ignition and crank sensor, but you know, the cam and crank was just a little bit more what I was after. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Hey guys, it's Eric again. I'm just showing in the alley. Happy Labor Day weekend to everybody, no matter where you're at. It's all our labor, huh? But I did Booma's Juke's back. She's had it for a couple of days now. Things running good, you know, even though, you know, what we see inside the engine. But what I did do is the cam and crank correlation together again, and I met with a little bit of, yeah, not really disaster, but misfortune. It's a weird circumstance. Maybe I'll explain it later to anybody that knows anything about VGA ports or something. But when I was using Modis on 19-inch HP monitor, it worked fine, but then the next day when I went to use it, I hit the power button and the monitor didn't come on. But it was weird. It was just a weird circumstance. But there's an internal fuse to the Modis. I'll show you in a minute. Like it, well, it goes back behind the battery. Then what happens? The fuse slid out. But what was weird is when I hit the power button, the screen would come on like that. But if I disconnected the VGA cable, the power light on the Modis went out. So somehow it was getting power from the monitor screen, but I still haven't. I tried two different. I took it apart and took a look at it. You know, I didn't see any, you know, more internal fuses or anything. It got burned, any of the pins on the VGA adapter, anything like that. It's pretty primitive, but on a better note, or on a, you know, positive note from the same deal as well, I was in there, cleaned up a couple things, you know, just cleaned up the inside of it, and the screen's a lot brighter now. So I don't know if it was just part of the whole thing. It always did have a semi-dim screen, so it's still fully usable, but I was just getting, you know, my old eyes were getting accustomed to a bigger monitor, but still good for channel scope and planning to do a lot of things with it. I was gonna, well, I'm still going to, but I'm gonna have to do it just on the actual Modis screen. I'll show you the cam and crank correlation with that, but I also did it with Hscope. And I did find a known good waveform on all data. And for Booma's Juke, at first I got the manual for it, and it's a very good manual. It's very thorough. If you use it on a laptop, you could use the search features a little bit better, but it's not like set up like all data or Mitchell. But it's bigger. I mean, it's huge. I'm going to turn on the screen recorder and I'll show you a little of each and where I found the waveform. I'm sure it's on the manuals, but it's hard, because whenever you shut off and you have to keep reloading like a 7,000 page PDF, it takes a little bit of time. Right now, Samsung Notes, it keeps saying, is it responding? Just because I opened it, a PDF with notes, and it's very large. So it's, you know, doing its best to keep it open for me. But the all data, it's $20 for 30 days, but it's for one vehicle, and it's much better. The e-manuals, you can keep it forever. It's $25, and I think there's like a $5 promo code out there. So if it's your vehicle and you want to keep it and you want to know everything, I mean, about the insides of the transmissions, how to rebuild the power steering pump, or, you know, all data and Mitchell, they're just R&R and prices, you know, labor times, everything like that. I mean, pretty good, but it's for one vehicle, and it's for 30 days. The e-manuals is for one vehicle, and but it's yours to keep. So, you know, you could, if you want to go through it, like it's more meant to be printed. It looks like a copy of the actual factory service manual. It looks like it's made to be printed to get easier access than scrolling through PDF, but it's very usable, but it will take you a lot more time, because you have to, when you're done with one part, you have to close it down. Like, you know, when you're done for the day, if you come back the next day, if you have to open up any other browser, any other kind of PDF, anything like that, you know, you're gonna have to close that and keep opening it. And the bigger they are, the longer they take to open. I might run it off a tablet, but on a laptop it did work better. Don't want to bring my laptop up here. If I got the tablet up here and I'm using Hscope off of it, it kind of saves one device. But I'll show you a little bit of both of them, and where I found the known good waveform on all data, and I was able to save the Hscope, the before and after the change, so we could see how far it is off. I just found it last night, so I really haven't compared it yet, and I do the same thing on the Modis too. It's the same. It's a picture of a waveform. It's I wish it was like almost like semi-transparent, like an overlay you could put on it. But I mean, thinking ahead, I'm sure there are programs like that. I'm not sure if you could do something like that in Paint, and how you'd almost have to take a screenshot of Hscope and then put like a transparent overlay over it for 720. But I mean, hey, I got it good enough. I'll show you what I mean. But if you just wanted an overlay, I'm sure it's possible, but I didn't go that route. So let me turn on screen recorder. I'll just show you where I found the waveform, and just the difference between them two real quick, because I mean, I'd go with the all data all day for 20 bucks, you know, a vehicle. But you know, anything you're doing for anybody, just you tell them, hey, you need that. You don't want to go off Google. And sadly, you don't want to go off YouTube. I mean, it's not so much. There's so many different models. People have different techniques. People have different tools. The instructionals are great. I like looking at the videos and seeing what I'm going to be looking at. Like yesterday, I looked up on Jim's Honda, like, where to get to the lower ball joints. Does it have stabilizer pins? Because I want to order them right ahead of time, because if they were where I thought they were and it turned out they were, I didn't want to see how to put stabilizer pins on. I wanted to see if they went to the lower control arm, they were the regular dog bone style, not the heavy aluminum ones that you could reuse. So I like going, just seeing what I'm going to be looking at, looking ahead. But instructional videos are hard step by step on things, because but if you got all data, something like that you could go off of, you're going to be a lot more ahead of the game, and then you could actually go look. If you run into a problem that you can't find, narrow it down, because then there will be something on YouTube. Not saying that there ain't great instructional videos, but it's when you're in the garage, the all data is faster. If you need to look up a spec in the back, instead of going back to YouTube, scrolling back to that moment you needed, and just have to keep finding them, it's the all data is like that. All right, I'll show you what I mean, and then I'll show you what the waveforms look like. Once again, it's the rising edge on the cam and the crank on the first rising edge, and then after every other cylinder, it's the first rising edge after the big teeth. And camshaft position sensor signal timing varies with the intake valve timing control. So that means as you accelerate at these, this would have been captured at idle. I did do a higher RPM one, but we would see with the VVT, we would see the camshaft adjusting the timing some. So that's why they're just giving you an idle. And my resolution wasn't set quite right on it, but I still got good enough image to, let me go to the first one, or number one cylinder. This would be number one on the camshaft. The rising edge is lining up with, we're actually in a higher RPM there, which for this isn't very helpful if it tests the higher RPM, because they're only giving us the idle waveform. This would be for number 3 cylinder. The edge is lining, so we're seeing we're lining up with the factory known good. Once again, lining up. Got a little bit of interference. It's probably from something in there or something, because it does repeat like over and over again. You can see on the crank sensor there's one little glitch, one little dropout. one little bump on the cam sensors. I mean, not worried about them. It's getting a good sensor, the good signal. That's all we're concerned about at the moment. These all seem, none of these look, you know, there's no filter at all on them. So, because the more filter you put on, the more you're getting around the edges. So you're better off just going with that little bit of noise. That doesn't bother me at all. But it's just interesting that they do all repeat that little V notch right here on the crank, and it lines up with the cam there and there. Interesting, but irrelevant actually. But that's just showing that the timing's straight on that. But now I'm going to load up before I put the timing chain on, and we could see how close it is to all the leading edges. Now this would have been the before. Okay. I'm not sure if I did any better on this resolution or if I was still low. I was going a little bit lower than I would have liked, but I just wanted to make sure I was getting a good signal and not over, you know, sampling it too much, not getting enough time. But really all you needed is a couple frames of data. I mean, this is really, you know, too much for a cam crank signal, but, you know. But we could see how far off, like the rising edges. Well, actually this needs inverted. You have to make sure on your waveform that you are inverted in the same, or oriented in the same direction. But now, as we could tell, number one should line up with the rising edge of this big tooth here. Look, we could see we're a whole notch off. So yeah, that's pretty decent to see before and after something like a timing chain. It's a one whole notch on crank sensor, because this was supposed to be right over here lined up. No, so as far as the walking around it, I was interested in, I believe that if you would have kept it on oscilloscope mode, you would have been able to see that more. You'd see the one frame moving more, you know, side to side. That's when Darren on Mechanic Mindset, he was doing that, and you could see on the BMW the chain, it was actually stretched and moving. You can, but you just have to measure every frame on this. Yep, it continues down. Alright, Hscope was more than capable of lining them two up. And at first I was on, like the Modis, I did the secondary ignition signal with it on, so I had 3 channels on. But really, I mean, you're not checking the ignition timing on this, you're just checking the, you know, your base engine timing, and you'd be able to tell, you know, that the timing's off. It did jump. I know it was one the whole tooth. It felt like 2, but you know, it was definitely 1 tooth on there off. So alright guys, there's that. I'm going to load up the Modis, and that I'll have to aim the screen at, because I don't have a screen record on it. Well, there is, but then I have to plug in the computer to get it off, so I'm going to just aim the phone at it. We're going to see if we can see the same exact thing as we see here, which I'm pretty sure we're going to. Alright guys, I got set up on the Modis. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so we could. It was easier with the big screen, but I mean, like I say, it's a little bit brighter. I could see pretty decent, and what we could see again is the same. The leading edges are lining up, so this would be would have number 1, 3, 4, and 2. Move it down to ones first, and then we could see it's after 1 we have the ignition event. Now this would be good for the primary, would usually be a little bit better, but the secondary, at least we were giving this a sync. I wanted to just, you know, basically try it out, see what, was using the Handtech paddle probe with the snap on, so it was you know, pretty happy I got that. Now the only thing, like I mentioned in the video whenever I was making this, I put a lot of time on the screen, and then you can't really zoom back in on it. From what I've found so far, you could zoom to where it makes your waveform smaller. So what you'd want to do is put as slow of a signal on the screen as possible recording, so then you could always zoom out. But it's I can't find a way to zoom in on it under the zoom feature for, like I showed before, like whenever you go, we're only on one-time zoom, anything else only makes that smaller. Which for some things is good. That's what you're going to want to see, is repetition like that. But this, you know, would have been nice to get in a little bit closer, but, you know, still perfectly usable. So I'm happy with that. All in all, it was a pretty good experiment. You know, the VGA port quit working on it. That was a bummer, but I mean, basically, you know, I could have used either of these tools to find, you know, just look at a known good, or now I'll know in the future. I mean, a lot of these engines aren't the same. It's not as simple as that the amount of grooves are. The firing order, there are some with a different amount of grooves for you. I mean, the 3 might be for cylinder 1, you don't know, but this happens to be just the 1, 3, 4, 2, same as the firing order. So, all right, guys. Yeah, I said I was going to do it before and after. I'm just sorry there was a little break in between there while I had some issues with, spent more time taking this thing apart and then trying to, you know, get the screen to work again. But, you know, it's still a pretty good workable 4-channel scope. So I'm happy with all that, happy with the test. Glad you guys were along with me. All right, guys, again, have a happy Labor Day. Stay safe. Adios. All right. There always seems to be one final note. On coil-over plug design, the paddle probes, if you had a rigid design, it would have been really hard to get number 1. But I know you can make them pretty easy. You could use a penny in just your test lead. But I was in between 2 hoses, literally like this. You know, if you could make a flexible piece, there's nothing wrong with making your own paddle probe, but that's how that was working. So I was able to get that in there and get the number 1 secondary firing event. Made it pretty easy, but it's just, you know, that's a Handtech too. How can they make a good paddle probe and then do me like that on the cable? All right, guys, I'm going this time for real. Adios.